The world in which we live is rather messed up. We know that. In fact, as Christians, we are keenly aware of how different the world is from what we believe and confess to be true and the right way to follow God in His reality and in His commandments. We look at the world doing things that are willfully, diametrically opposed to God's revealed will, and we are bewildered and sometimes frustrated and often irritated by this. And it becomes even more difficult when we are compelled to go out into the world where we have to interact with that broken, messed up world. And then we find ourselves sometimes conflicted. How much should I be engaging in this world? Should I be going to stores that support things that I'm opposed to? And it kind of starts to broach into areas like boycotting bad businesses or boycotting those that are promoting things of which we are completely at odds. And so it's hard. We ask sometimes, what should we do? And you get sometimes the idea of we should just patronize Christian establishments or those who hold our values. And we should avoid those who are doing wrong things. And Christians have sometimes rather strong views about this. I think we can actually say a little more about this than we think. It's not just a matter of, well, do whatever you think. There's actually some pretty clear scriptural direction on this, and I want to get to that and share that with you. But I first want to talk about what I think is the key aspect in all of this, and that's what we should be asking ourselves is, what witness are we giving? And this gets back to other things I've said in other videos, but I want to be clear on this. What should drive us as Christian people is always a twofold objective, a twofold tell us. We want to make known the reality of Jesus Christ and His forgiveness. We want people to be right with God and have His forgiveness of sins. And we want to be people who engage in the world and do well what God has given us to do and help to make the world more nearly what God would have it to be, working for God's justice in the world. Both of those things are good and right things for us to strive to do. That should be what drives Christians. What we're not interested in doing is preserving ourselves or retaining our own righteousness or our own sense of purity. Where we stand is not that important. What matters is the witness that we give to the world about Christ and His reality for forgiveness and about God's will in the world. That's what drives us, our service to those around us, our witness. So when we ask questions about how should I be engaging the world, what should I be doing, where should I be buying my coffee? Do I go to the corner coffee shop that has great coffee but has really obnoxious causes they support with rainbow flags or whatever else all over the business, and you feel troubled by that? Frankly, that's never a problem for me. I'm not a coffee drinker, so I'm able to avoid that problem. But there are other issues. You go to any store and they might have, especially in certain months of the year, their rainbow flags emblazoned all over the doors and letting you know where they stand on these things. So Christians will wonder, what should I be doing? Should I just be going to Christian stores? Should I be avoiding those that are of supporting causes which I know are wrong or even evil according to God's will? What should I be doing? So we get back to the witness thing. We should be asking ourselves the question, how am I witnessing to the world around me? How am I showing them God's truth? And we do that by living our lives consistently with God's will and not engaging in things that are lousy. In any of the commandments, the 6th commandment and also the 8th commandment about bearing false witness and about stealing and about tearing people down, the 5th commandment, or about disobeying or tearing down and dishonoring authority, the 4th commandment. We should be living as people of integrity in all areas of our life so we give a profound witness to God's truth and His kindness and His righteousness in the world, and then have opportunities to speak about God and His forgiveness. So, does that mean I can buy my coffee at the corner shop that has their obvious gay rights agenda going, or whatever other agenda that might be opposed to God's way of doing things in this world and what God would have us do as His people? And that would apply to all people. I want to be clear on that. But can I go there? Well, I think we get back to the witness thing. You want to go there and be a witness. And if you're buying coffee there, are you witnessing that you agree with them? I don't believe that's true. Now, if you in your conscience are troubled by this, never violate your conscience. So if you're bothered by, I think I just supported that cause, don't do it. You need to get this squared away in your mind. You should never violate your own conscience. No matter what somebody tells you, don't let anybody tell you, don't worry about it. If your conscience is bothered, you need to get that figured out. Go and talk to someone, talk to your pastor, read scripture, talk to a good Christian friend, and get this sorted out and figure out what is the truth here, what is a violation of God's will, what counts as stepping outside of God's will for my life, and is this really something I should feel bad about, or is this a false kind of oversensitive conscience? You need to get that squared away. Don't violate your conscience. But I do believe that a Christian can, with good conscience, go to stores in the world, buy their coffee, buy their clothes, buy their groceries, whatever else they're doing, interacting with the world, participating in the things of the world, not by endorsing or joining people in their sin, but by simply existing in the world. That's what we need to do. And by doing that, we give a witness that we are part of the world, and yet we're doing things in a different way. Now, St. Paul addresses this, I think, specifically in 1 Corinthians chapter 5. This is a fascinating chapter of the Bible, one that gets very little attention because it's about a church discipline issue. And here Paul speaks directly about a problem going on in the church in Corinth. And I'll save that for another time, the church discipline side. What's interesting for today's discussion is at the very end, he gets done discussing this problem of a member of the church there, a so-called brother who is walking outside of God's will in the area of sexuality. He had actually married his father's former wife, whatever that means. And whether it's his mom or a stepmother, it's rotten regardless. So that was the situation. And Paul is being very clear, that person has no business being a member of the congregation. But then he says this. This is verse 9 of chapter 5 of 1 Corinthians. I wrote you in my letter not to associate with immoral people. Okay, that sounds pretty clear. No immoral people. That's most of the world around us. Now, verse 10. I did not at all mean with the immoral people of this world, or with the covetous and swindlers, or with idolaters, which would be everybody, because the first commandment is always being violated. For then you would have to go out of the world. You see how clear-cut Paul is here? If I told you not to deal with immoral people, you'd have to leave the world. And the implication is, that's ridiculous. Of course you live in the world because it's God's world. You're supposed to be in the world. You're one of God's people in the world. You don't flee from the world, you go into the world. This is consistent with Paul again and again and again. So then verse 11. Actually, I wrote to you not to associate with any so-called brother if he should be an immoral person, or covetous, or an idolater, or a reviler, or a drunkard, or a swindler, not even to eat with such a one. Don't give the impression to a Christian brother who is walking apart from Christ that things are fine. That's Paul's point. Again, that's another topic for another time. Then he wraps things up, verse 12. For what have I to do with judging outsiders? Do you not judge those who are within the church? That's mind-blowing. Paul says, I don't judge the sinners out there in the world because they're obviously sinners. God will take care of them. And that's exactly what he says in verse 13. But those who are outside, God judges. Remove the wicked man from among yourselves. So Paul's point here is we actually judge each other in the church according to the standard of, are you following Christ? Are you upholding God's truth? Are you witnessing well of God's reality? If you're not, we've got to deal with that. That's what Christians do with each other. That's how iron sharpens iron. That's part of what Paul says is a good thing. But what we don't do is waste time judging the world, condemning the world, getting worked up about the world because it's sinful. Of course it's sinful. It's broken. It's fallen. We know it. And we don't run away from that world. We go into that world. And we go shopping there, and we go to events, and we participate, and we talk to people there. We don't join them in their sin, and we don't be part of that sinful reality, but we interact with these people. We have to. We must. Now, can you spend your money supporting Christian causes? Absolutely. And if you have a choice between a Christian coffee seller and a non-Christian coffee seller, I believe Paul would even say, support your brother. Do it. But don't do it in a way that snubs or acts like you are too good for or can't interact with the other guy. You should be always interacting. But we also take care of each other, so I get that. So we should be looking out for other Christians, supporting them, helping them, supporting them in their businesses. That's all well and good. But you don't have to feel like somehow it would be wrong for me to participate in supporting this cause. So am I a big fan of boycotts? Not really. I think boycotts usually are kind of a self-righteous sort of a thing and, moral indignation that gets worked up and rarely effective. But that's beside the point. The bigger point is you as a Christian should be free to be able to engage the world without worrying about getting dirty in the world because it's God's world. And when you get into the world and you interact with it, you do it with the confidence that you have Christ's forgiveness, you know who you are, and you're bringing God's truth into that situation. That's how it works. Yes, you have to be careful. You don't engage in that world too much. You don't build strong bonds there because you're different than them. And St. John makes that clear in his Gospels about his epistle about being not part of the world and not being friends of the world. So there is certainly a tension here to understand. So I'm not saying we go whole hog and just engage in everything the world's doing, but we also don't have to build this kind of insular sort of, no, I could never do that. It doesn't work that way. We have to be in that world because it's God's world, and when we go into that world, we're bringing God's truth into that world, and we do that with confidence, and we do that with certainty, and we do that with, frankly, a great deal of joy because we have God's truth, and we have God's forgiveness, and that's what we want to share with those around us.